I decided to take my own advice from last time and do this little thing called research. I've often heard Superstore cited as Kirby's first big mainstream success, but at the time of Superstore's release, it was actually the lowest selling main entry. Even Dreamland 2 sold more, and not a whole lot of people really remember that game. And yeah, sales don't necessarily equate to critical success, but I just find it interesting that Kirby Superstore was a ton of people's first Kirby game back in the day, despite selling worse than its predecessors. Here I was thinking that Dreamland was this fairly obscure game at the time, and yet it's still the best-selling game in the franchise. Not that I necessarily blame them for picking up Superstore. When you see 8 games and 1 advertised in the box, any kid is gonna eat that up. But that claim is simultaneously accurate and inaccurate. Superstore isn't one big adventure like most games. It's instead a bunch of smaller Kirby games put together into one entry. So while you technically got 8 Kirby games, it's still really only one. Along with this unusual structure, the game also had unusual packaging in Japan. It came in a wooden box. In Japan, a box made of Paulownia wood signifies that it stored something valuable. That's definitely gotta stick out on a store shelf too. I genuinely can't think of another game that didn't come in either a cardboard box, plastic case, or a steel booklet. Of course, this whole story is irrelevant to me because I played the DS remake first. A lot of people my age have really fond memories of Superstar Ultra, and it's often seen as one of the best in the series. And honestly, me too. I loved this game during the single time that I rented it and then never bought it. Because for some reason, I just decided to buy the original off the Wii shop and just never felt the need to play the remake again. I did really like SNES Superstar, but I don't know, I don't remember the original as fondly as the time I rented Ultra. I must have played the game at least twice within those 5 days I had to play it. I was obsessed. Like, seriously, it weirds me out that I never owned Superstar Ultra before this. How could I love a game that much and just never actually buy it? Out of the 4 games I'm looking at for this marathon, Superstar Ultra was the one I was looking forward to replaying the most. Not only because I haven't played Superstar in years, but also because SNES Superstar never really clicked with me, and yet Ultra clearly did. Seeing how much of a fan favorite this game is my problem with Superstar itself, or had I just been playing the wrong version all this time? Unlike Nightmare and Dreamland, I'm not really looking at SNES Superstar because Ultra is literally just the same game but better, so it would be pretty redundant. But like with Golden Sun Dark Dawn, I have to emulate the game to record it, so if there's any inconsistencies with real hardware, that's probably why. Although I didn't notice any issues. You know, I'm honestly shocked they never released this game on Wii U Virtual Console. Squeak Squad and Mass Attack are, so why not Superstar Ultra? And don't even give me the excuse the SNES Superstar was already on there, because they also put up Mario 64 DS. It's a really weird exclusion. I don't know, point is, Superstar Ultra, did I like the damn thing or not? Let's find out. Superstore starts out on a main menu this time, as opposed to a world map or a level or something. Like I said before, this is a bunch of smaller Kirby games forming one big entry. So there's this corkboard thing, letting you select which one you want to play. It feels like one of those boards you just pin up pictures of all your family and friends on. Like, yeah, I'm Kirby, here's all the stuff I did recently. Dumb voice aside, if you want to replay any mode, you can restart one of them instead of restarting the whole game, which is great. Because the only one you have unlocked from the start is Spring Breeze, which is okay. It's basically a tutorial to let you get used to everything going on. And honestly, there is a lot more going on than an adventure or Dreamland 2. The most obvious is the health bar that you have now. Instead of 6 hits and you're dead, you can take a lot more damage. And you no longer lose your ability after every hit. Thank God. That was annoying. Now you'll only lose it after a big hit or if you take too much damage. A much nicer compromise. Speaking of those, copy abilities not only have their own appearances now, but they don't just do one thing. Before, you'd press the B button and use an attack. That's it. This is all that ability does. Now, if you press the attack button in a certain way, like while dashing or in the air or whatever, you have more than one attack. And as far as I can tell, the only 3 abilities that aren't like this are Stone, Wheel, Suplex, and the 4 Screen Nukes. Yeah, there's 4 Screen Nukes this time. Was this really necessary? It almost feels like a precursor to Smash Bros. Because these controls really feel like a simplistic fighting game, which makes sense, seeing as the game came from the same mind that figured out how to turn yoga into a fighting style. There was only 18 regular abilities in this game as opposed to Adventure's 20 or so, but each one has so many more options that the amount of stuff you can do overall practically tripled. They even combine multiple abilities into one, they let you do so much stuff with them. Instead of Fireball and Fire, you just have Fire, which can do both and then some. Same with Ice and Freeze. It's crazy how much fun each ability is too, and all of them feel just about equal until we get into boss rush territory. Just in terms of casual use, it's hard to pick a favorite this time, but if I had to choose, maybe Ice. It's just fun to use in this game, and you ice skate when you dash, so that's an awesome touch. It feels good to just skate around and destroy everything without even thinking about it. I also always really liked Mirror and its ludicrous defensive options. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. You can also press L or R to do this gold move, which I usually don't use, but with Mirror, you're straight up invincible while using it. Kid me loved abusing this. That's why I suck at this game. I was also surprised at how much fun it is to use Jet. Not so much for combat, but it's hella satisfying to just zoom around the place. There's a few weird omissions though. Like instead of Spork or Tornado, they put in Suplex. Why? But for how fun just about every ability is to use this time, I'm not complaining. Although for how fun the game is to just play, for some reason, Ultra changed the controls. On SNES, B jumped and Y attacked. On DS, A jumps and B attacks. It's the same button layout, why change it? Or at least have the option to switch between the two. It's probably because Squeak Squad used this layout, but it took me way longer to adjust than it should have. Although, in fairness, I was using a DualShock 4 to play the game, which obviously wasn't intended, but it's still weird that they didn't let you use the original controls. Huh, somehow I haven't mentioned this yet. The X button, or A button, apparently. Great, now I have Stockholm Syndrome and prefer the DS controls. Anyway, you can press a button to turn your current ability into a helper to help you out. If they get low on health, you can either literally throw a new ability their way, or you can share any health pickups shortly after consuming them. So like, they just bird feed their food to each other? Look, I know you devour living beings whole on a regular basis, but I'm gonna have to draw the line there. That's disgusting. Please stop making me say this. I thought this was the only way to get rid of your ability at first, but no, you can still press select to drop it. I was really confused about why I didn't think this basic feature was in the game, until I replayed the Super Nintendo version for footage. For whatever stupid reason, pressing select does nothing on SNES as far as I know. So throwing your hat or creating a helper was the only way to get rid of your ability. Why? That's so bizarre. What if I don't want my helper to have that specific ability? Hence why I'm trying to get rid of it. Luckily, they realized how dumb this was and put it in Ultra. But since I'm talking about SNES Superstar, the fun part comes when you plug in a second controller and bam, 2-player co-op. You'll both die if Kirby dies, so make sure player 1 is actually competent. On DS, it's a bit more annoying to set up. You have to make a room in the main menu, so it's not quite plug and play like on SNES, but given it's a handheld, I'll let that slide. You need 2 copies of the game, too, unless you want to replay Spring Breeze a bunch of times. That's a good enough segue for me. Let's talk about those modes now, shall we? I already mentioned Spring Breeze being the tutorial segment, but what I didn't mention is how it was an abridged remake of Kirby's Dream Land. They cut out all the flack, too. There's no longer a mandatory boss rush, so the final level is just the fight against Dedede.
Guys, do you know who that is?
You're kidding, right? It's Mario.
Really cool how they're paying tribute to the series' origins. Wait, they already did this! The final level in Adventure was an abridged version of Dreamland. It can start to come off as pandering if you do stuff like this too much, but it luckily doesn't in this game. But it's awfully close. Please don't have a level like this in Dreamland 3. I should mention the cutscenes before and after each mode. They're simple, but they're really charming and look pretty nice. So let's replace them with crappy JPEG quality FMVs in the remake. Look, I get that it's the DS. We got these fancy video playback capabilities now, but these just look too low quality, even when viewed on a DS screen. It's not a deal breaker for Ultra, but I really would have preferred if they just kept the ones from Super Nintendo with the improved sprite work, which I have to say is really awesome. They took the original sprites and straight up improved them without distracting from the original style. That ain't easy. Good on you guys. The other short mode is Gourmet Race, where you just race against Dedede with each food you pick up increasing your speed. That's pretty much it. You can try to improve your times, but Gourmet Race is the weakest out of the main modes for me. There's not much to this one. Awesome music though, along with the game's soundtrack as a whole. Like, damn, they did not have to go so ham for some of this stuff. Next up is Dynablade, which is the closest Superstar has to a traditional Kirby game, and even then it's only 4 stages and a boss stage. Each stage is accessed from a world map, and you play a goal game at the end of each one. There's 2 secret switches to find as well, and they lead to ability rooms for you to pick whatever. And the best part? Every ability is covered here, thank you! This mode isn't long, like half an hour, but this is appreciated nonetheless. Story-wise though, some giant bird is terrorizing everyone. Go stop it. And after kicking Dynablade's ass, oh no, she has babies. And Kirby takes care of them while their mom recovers. Oh my god, how did beating up a giant bird end so wholesomely? Next will be telling me Kirby's sending these kids to college. Man, my heart. Aside from that though, this one's alright, just kinda there, honestly. Although another nice improvement are these copy ability stands. Instead of having an enemy that just stands there for you to suck it up, you can just jump into one of these and blammo, copy ability. They even put these before boss fights so you don't have to track down something decent to use. But next is probably the biggest port of this game, the Great Cave Offensive, also known as the Smash stage that is way too big. Kirby randomly falls down a hole and decides to take it as an opportunity to get filthy rich. The GCO is a collectathon, plain as that. While the levels are linear, they're all connected out in straight lines, so you can walk all the way back to the store if you want. But that takes forever, so don't do that. That's my only big issue with this mode. There's no way to fast travel. And when you do finish it and go back to the entrance, you finish the mode. So it does loop back around for you to get anything you missed. But being able to warp between save rooms or something would have been nice. Especially with how well hidden some of this stuff is. Like, look at this! The wind is blowing me back way too hard. How the hell do I get to this thing? And there was one in the tower that requires both you and your partner to have specific abilities to get to it. That's just mean. But using sleep copy stands as an obstacle? That's super clever, I love that. I remember GCO being really tedious, and I was pleasantly surprised it didn't feel that way this time. For some reason, I got lost and couldn't figure out what to do, but it's literally a straight line to the end, more or less. How did I get lost? It's really fun trying to find all the treasures, and the occasional Nintendo reference was always a nice surprise. And please don't give Kirby the screw attack and the Triforce. This dude's basically a god already. And just the thought of Captain Falcon being out there somewhere with his helmet off is completely terrifying. But on the bright side, we have Mr. Saturn to help cheer us up. This gotta count for something, right? You know, I'm not even surprised he got himself locked inside a chest. Ultra had to have changed some of these though, like I found a star paddle from Squeak Squad, that had to be new. And while we're talking about all these treasures, I only found 75% of them? To think I was trying to be thorough. The weirdest part of this game has to be Meta Knight's Revenge, because for some reason there's not only a hilariously generous time limit on everything, but it also has a ton of dialogue. Meta Knight apparently wants to rule over Dreamland using this giant ship he suddenly has. Random ship aside, I thought he was supposed to be a good guy, or at least morally gray. Yeah, he did send his troops after Kirby, but he helped him along the way too. And that made it feel like he was testing him to make sure he was capable of fighting Nightmare. In Revenge, he's just a straight up bad guy. And I would appreciate them attempting to give Kirby a bit more of a story, but there isn't one. Kirby beats up their ship and they try to stop him to no avail. That's it. Who even are these people? They throw new faces at you without any reason to care about them and don't even show up in person. What's the point of all this dialogue if it's all dead air? You can remove it entirely and nothing of value is lost. The part where Dynablade shows up to help was pretty awesome, but it's otherwise just one of those there modes. Although I do like the occasional hidden path that gives you access to healing items and free abilities. That's neat. You also fight Meta Knight again, and they give you a sword making you expect a repeat of an adventure, but you can just stand there until Meta Knight gets impatient and fights you anyway. That's really funny. Milky Way Wishes is the final mode of the main story, so to speak. And man, did they go out with a bang. Isn't this everyone's favorite part of Superstar? Yeah, pretty sure it is. The Sun and Moon are fighting, somehow, and this random dude named Mark suggests making a wish to this giant comet named Nova. But in order to do that, you need to collect the 6 stars from the nearby planets. No one's got any better ideas, so that's what Kirby decides to do. You get a star at the end of each stage, which you can do in any order. On top of that, copy abilities work differently in Milky Way Wishes. You can't get abilities from devouring living beings whole. Instead, you have to find them as collectibles, and once you do, you can use that ability whenever you want. So yeah, this is a Metroidvania style of Kirby, and it kicks ass. When you start wishes, you feel naked. You don't have a good way to defend yourself. But when you get your first ability, it's suddenly a different game entirely. You instantly recognize how useful these copy essences are, and you go out of your way to get all 19 of them. Once you get a sizable chunk of your abilities, you feel unstoppable. Your partner died? Who cares? Just get another one. You lost your ability? Doesn't matter. You still have it. Being able to play the stages in any order increases the replayability of this mode too. If you know where all your favorites are, you can prioritize going to those stages first. Or not. You can experiment all you want, it's up to you. And because I can use whatever ability I want, experimenting is more fun than ever because if it's not working out, you can always switch back. Part of me really wants a whole game like this. Seriously, this is such a cool idea. But the other part of me knows that this only works when it's a short game like this. Imagine not having a good chunk of your abilities until like 3/4 of the way through a 6 to 8 hour long game. That just sounds annoying for a Kirby game. And they would need either a lot of abilities or drip feed them to you to give you a consistent stream of new new ones. Not to mention it feels overpowered in the long term. But for what we have, Milky Way Wishes is the biggest highlight of Superstar for me. Although the one thing I ended up not liking this time is that they give you Copy as a permanent ability you can find, and I suddenly realized why this ability exists at all. Yeah, there's a Copy ability that's given by one enemy, and all it does is let you obtain a different ability. Copy is completely worthless in every other part of the game, but indispensable here, completely ruining the entire point of Milky Way Wishes. I would have been able to stomach it more if they made it really hard to find, encouraging you to play the intended way, but that's not the case. On the world map, there's this little area labeled question marks, and all you do is play a short level with Copy at the end. It is hidden, but if you know about it, there's not much stopping you from just going there and playing it like a normal Kirby game. I at least understand why it's here, but they really should have made it more well hidden. It kinda ruins the fun of Milky Way Wishes. I'm just thankful I can completely ignore it and get it last. But after getting the 6 stars and heading to Nova to claim your wish, Mox shows up out of nowhere and wishes to control all of Popstar. And then he turns into a demonic hellspawn. With Nova about to crash into Popstar, you destroy this thing from the inside, purge Mox from existence, and beat the game. It just kinda ends, to be honest. Whatever. But if you're playing Superstar Ultra, there's still more stuff to do. First up is Revenge of the King, which is pretty much a harder version of Spring Breeze. That's mostly it, although I like how they made all the environments and enemies look different. You get a fight against Kabula too, which is the only thing Spring Breeze was missing from Dreamland. The final stage is totally new, at least. I could have done without the extra dialogue, but it is pretty entertaining to see DDD slowly lose his mind as Kirby gets closer and closer to him. Bandana Waddle Dee even shows up, which I think is actually his first appearance aside from the sub-game in the original. This dude tries to stop you from getting to DDD, only for you to completely decimate him. Poor guy. Kirby showed him mercy though, because he watched you during the Mass DDD fight. Look at him. What a champ. He even cheers when you take damage, I love that. Although they force you to use Hammer for this fight, which has the best damage output in the game, so Mass DDD is pretty easy, weirdly enough. But now it's time for the real stuff, because we've got Meta Nightmare Ultra. You play the whole game again as Meta Knight, but unlike Nightmare's version, you can actually save in between each stage. On the touchscreen, you've got this point system to power you up. From defeating enemies, you get points to call a helper, run faster for a limited time, give yourself a full heal, or use a screen nuke. Which seems really overpowered, right? Because it is. This is such a power trip, man. Meta Knight is hilariously overpowered, even by Kirby standards, and it feels awesome. No wonder I played this twice during the time that I rented it. It's just fun to plow through everything without even trying. Too bad he doesn't know where to run anymore. Maybe that's why I never picked up Ultra before this. But instead of fighting Marks at the end, Meta Knight wishes to fight the strongest warrior in the galaxy. So, you get to fight Galactonite, who's easy because you have way too much health, but whatever, he's fun to beat up anyway, and has a pretty awesome new theme. The only thing left in this game to really talk about is the arena, which is just a boss rush. Ultra even has 2 new variants of it. This boss rush is much better than Adventure's version. You get to pick which ability to start out with, and between each boss, you get limited healing items and a choice of 2 new abilities to pick from if you want. This stuff makes it much more doable than last time. You know, in hindsight, I really wish they improved the boss rush in Nightmare and Dreamland to be something more like this. The arena is way more fun, and hard. This took me a few tries to get through. While Hammer does the most damage at the cost of low range, I found Plasma to be the easiest to use for this mode. With good damage from a distance, I found it to be the safest option without it being painfully slow, although having to match the D-pad this much starts to hurt my hands after a while. You know, this is a good time to talk about the bosses in this game. Most are pretty standard fare, but some really stand out. I really like Chameleon, who turns half invisible. It just looks cool. And if you copy one of the paint blobs he throws at you, you get Paint, which is this super obscure ability. I also like how he's a different color every time you fight him. That's a great touch. The computer virus is super cool too. You can only attack it while it's outside his window, acting like a turn-based RPG. It's super creative, and you even get fake stat-ups at the end of the fight. Luckily, the arena skips that part, so you don't have to go crazy trying to refight this thing. The game has 2 or 3 annoying bosses though. I really don't like Fatty Whale just because of how big he is. Dodging his attacks is really awkward, and I often get hit just trying to hit him. Similarly, I don't like Main Cannon number 2 because of how awkward it is to hit it. But if we want awkward, look no further than the reactor. You can't hit this thing directly. You have to trick this laser into hitting the energy core instead, which means it's a waiting game. Isn't that the whole point of copy abilities, so that you can defend yourself and do damage without needing to wait around? I'm just glad this is the only boss that's like that. I don't mind having to hit specific weak points, but having to wait around for the boss to attack me is just boring. The arena also has two variants in Ultra. The first is Helper to Hero, which has you play as a helper for the whole time. You only have to fight 10 bosses as opposed to 18, and you only have 3 tomatoes as opposed to 5 to compensate. You'd think that being locked to one ability would make it harder, but it really doesn't. Because I'm guaranteed to have the ability I want, I can get through the whole thing with stone without too much trouble. You even fight a stronger version of Wham Bam in the end. That's a cool bonus. But once you finish every other mode in the game, you unlock the true arena, which is a boss rush against all the new bosses in Ultra. And you only have 5 mini tomatoes to get through it. Have fun. I'm gonna be honest, I tried, man. I tried. I even streamed it for funsies and just decided to use save states to do the new fight against Marks. You know, just to experience it. And footage, but you know. But if you want to know just how hard this is, I used save states to beat Marks' soul, and it still took me 50 tries and 30 minutes later. So yeah, my save file says that I beat the true arena, but I didn't. I'm a fake gamer, I admit it. Feel free to unsubscribe. Seriously though, what masochist came up with this? The true arena is brutal. If you want a challenge, this is it. What's less brutal though are the sub-games, which were the exact opposite. Boring. SNES Superstore had 2 of them, while Ultra adds 3 more that use the touchscreen. First is Samurai Kirby, which is just the same thing as Quick Draw. Pretty obvious where Nightmare's version of Quick Draw came from, though. I forgot about this one. That's how little I cared about it. The other SNES subgame is Megaton Punch, which is just a quick time event. Also not very interesting. I love how ridiculous it is to see Pop Star take this much damage. How is this planet still standing? Or, floating, I guess, because, like, space. The DS minigames use the touchscreen, but otherwise they're just as boring. Card Swipe is just a memory game. On the Draw is just a shooting gallery, but gives a god-tier reaction image. And Snack Tracks just has you tap away bugs and bombs so that your Kirby can gorge himself, but they're just a distraction, honestly. Nothing noteworthy, but nothing awful either. If it wasn't obvious over how much stuff there is to go over, Superstar Ultra has a ton of content, at least by Kirby standards. It took me 3 hours to get through everything in Adventure and 4 for Dreamland 2, but it took me nearly 8 hours to get through everything in Superstar Ultra. Replaying all that made me remember why I don't think is the pinnacle of the series. Not that I didn't enjoy it all, because I did. Even the duller moments were still fun at least. To go back to whether my issue was Superstar itself or if I was playing the wrong version, I think that Superstar itself was my issue. The game has variety over substance. Think about it this way, Superstar Ultra is like a bag of Chex Mix. It's got a bunch of different stuff in it and they complement each other well, but I'd rather just have pretzels, you know? Having a bunch of smaller games put into one entry was a cool idea and I loved how experimental they got with some of these modes, but I'm glad they never did this again because I'd rather have one big game that's more satisfying to play through. Granted, I'd say it's in my top 5 favorite Kirby games, but I personally like Nightmare and Dreamland more because Superstar feels unsatisfying to finish. It all just ends with no real payoff and shows that more isn't necessarily better. Ultra does add more content and it's clearly a better version of the game, but more content can't fix that core issue of the game being unsatisfying to finish. Even the final bosses of each respective mode don't feel gratifying to beat because none of them feel like the true final boss. I know that Marks is supposed to be and Galactonite would be the super boss, but they're missing that epicness I've come to love from Kirby. Even Adventure did this better seeing as that boss had 3 phases. Marks technically had 2 phases, but the arena counts them as 2 separate fights, and Nova is fought with a starship instead of the usual gameplay, which, to be fair, Nightmare had a shooter section too, but it also had 2 phases of regular gameplay. I guess what I'm trying to say is that Superstar may be a bag of interesting, but in doing that, it lacks focus. If you want variety, you'll get that in spades, but the end result is something that doesn't feel nearly as good to see to the end. I finished Nightmare and Dreamland and thought,
Man, what a great game.
I finished Superstar Ultra and thought,
What now?
well, I guess I can play Dreamland 3, so tune in next week for that. But if anyone's interested in Superstar and somehow hasn't played it at this point, it's on SNES Online, so you probably already have access to it if you've got a Switch. The DS version goes for around $20, which is honestly pretty good for an old Nintendo game, believe it or not. Although it's really bizarre how they've never re-released Ultra in some way. They hand out SNES Superstar like candy. I've got 5 copies of this game. But anyway, this has been Flame Guy. Take care, and I'll see you all next mission.